Welcome back to I Now Pronounce You Divorce. Each week, we try to dive into topics that we think that our clients and potential clients would find interesting as they're navigating the legal world. I sometimes don't think of it as a tough navigation, but it is definitely one that goes easier if you have somebody working for you. And today, we're joined by two people, Jeff and Aaron. And Aaron, I'll let you introduce yourself first. Tell us a little bit about what you do, and then we can see what Jeff does.
Yeah, thanks, Charles. Great to be on the podcast with you guys. My name's Aaron. I work with Networth Realty. I am a licensed real estate agent here in Virginia Beach. New to the market. Opened the brokerage in September last year with a team of 4 guys. Now grew the team to 8 agents total, and we focus on distressed real estate. We purchase them using cash as is. More distressed, the better. And we rehab it and flip it back on the market for resale. Keep a few in our portfolio as well for rentals.
Absolutely. And Jeff, I know a little bit about you. I know a little bit what you do. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do and what kind of, and how you help people?
And my name is Jeff Sodoma. I'm an estate planning attorney at Melone Hatley PC here in Virginia Beach, and been here a little while now. And basically what I try to do is help people plan before they have the need the documents that we're talking about, getting them set up with wills and trusts and things like that.
As my grandfather used to tell me all the time, proper planning prevents poor performance.
That's right.
And I think nowhere is that more true than in estate planning, right? We all know it's going to happen. I haven't found anybody yet that's beat death. So, planning properly does help you along. So one of the things that, as a divorce law firm that we ran into was, as a purely all-encompassing need, was when people were coming out of divorce, their life had changed significantly. They really needed estate planning documents. And so, with that in mind, Jeff, what are the most basic estate planning documents that somebody would need when they're kind of having a life change, not just divorce, but just any sort of change?
Well, I like to talk to people about the three main documents I like to talk to people about. Anybody over the age of 18 in Virginia and most other states really needs to think about having a will, having an advanced medical directive, and having a power of attorney. Sometimes some of the documents go by different names, but the gist is the same. Will talks about what happens to all your things, all the stuff that you own after you pass away. The advanced medical directive and the power of attorney talk about what happens to you and your affairs while you're still alive, but incapacitated. And incapacitated basically means not able to care for yourself.
And, the reason Aaron's here is one of the biggest assets we have is houses. And I think that it's one, I know sometimes, and I'm not trying to say that, I by any means have a palatial mansion, but sometimes you walk into your house and you forget just how much it's worth, like how much of a bank account it has become. So Aaron, can you kind of walk us through, especially with what you do, where you see mismanagement of assets meet the real estate market?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of it is just understanding, especially having the trust in place. A lot of the time, whenever you're dealing with a distressed property, most people don't even know, who's the next in line, who's the heir. And it gets really messy whenever you have multiple heirs to the estate. And then that's why it's really important to always work with a great estate attorney. I think it gets really messy whenever you have a lot of hands in the pot, and being able to refer to an attorney for that legal advice to a seller is really important, especially when they're dealing with an investor. That's why it helps to be fully licensed under a brokerage, know that you're working with somebody that's credible, but alongside with an attorney that's even more so credible to help with that transaction.
And Aaron, I want to stick with you because I know frequently what we run into, and I've seen it time and time again in estate planning is, you will have a bad plan. So maybe somebody does have a plan, but it's just not good. And now you have a piece of property sitting there where maybe taxes are lining up against it. People's mortgages are still piling up against it. It may be falling into ill repair as it sits there and waits for all this stuff to go through. How do people know that they're working with somebody they can trust?
Yeah, and that's a lot of the issue is that it's a competitive market anywhere you go in the US. You have a lot of people that are just professional real estate investors, and then claiming to be somebody that they're not, which usually is going to be an end buyer. So it's important to know that you do have proof of funds in place. Bring a few settlement statements of recent closings. My brokerage closes on anywhere between 10 to 15 properties per month, and being able to show that credibility, having your transactional, whoever's like handling your accounting, I always tie that to my proof of funds letter for my buyer, who also is my broker. So having those documents in place is really important. The credibility, it can only go as far as the initial face-to-face meeting, and so I think that's most important. You're not doing business over the phone. It's at a kitchen table oftentimes, or out for lunch. A lot of the time, family members come into town from out of state because they're trying to help their state and have all the meetings that they need to.
And the reason I was so excited to have this podcast is this is kind of where theory meets the real world, right? The theory behind the document meets the real world. So, Jeff, when you're trying to talk to somebody, one of the issues that we've run into the past is you will have somebody will pass away. They'll naturally go to their children. Let's say like a house will go to the children. You'll have one child that can afford it and one child that really can't. Right. So one person's sitting there, they want to sell the house as fast as they can. The other person's sitting there, they're like, we could rent this out and make monthly profit. How do you help somebody that comes in to talk to you that has these assets realize that? And I say realize that in a questioning way because it's not a nice thing to say.
I think a lot of times there's a lot of misperceptions in the role of the attorney. Um,
Mm,
Not that we're the bad guy, but we could just be a voice of reason in the room and say, look, this is the law.
mhm,
If two people or more than two people own property together, each person has the rights to do what they want with the property. But we all have to come together at the end of the day and
mhm,
agree on what is going to happen. So yeah, one person might want to live there, one person might want to sell it. There may be more than two people, siblings and cousins and all these other different owners that have these issues. And you've got to basically, again, not be the bad guy, but just be the voice of reason and say, this is the law. This is what's going to happen. You could go to court and fight with each other, and this could take a lot of time and effort on out of everybody's life. And at
mhm,
the end of the day, the only people that are going to benefit from fighting are, unfortunately, or fortunately for us, the attorneys.
mhm,
And we don't want that to happen. So let's get together and talk about it. And we have to understand too, because people have rights to do what they need to do with the property. Again, one person could live there and one person could want to rent it out and different things like this. They also have responsibilities to each other as
mhm.
co-owners. So if one person wants to live there, they have to pay the other owner's rent a lot of times.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, then we need a lease agreement. Well, we don't want to do that. Well, okay, then let's figure out what the next steps are. And again, all the owners are responsible for their part of repairs to the house. So if it
Mhm,
needs a new roof and a new roof is $50,000, who's going to pay for that? Well, I don't want to pay for that. Well, you're responsible for it. So the property
yeah,
sits and it decays, the taxes go unpaid, and it's just a litany of horrors that nobody wants to see. So
mhm.
that's just kind of a reality check. And I think a lot of times the attorney has to serve as a reality check for the family members in these cases.
And it is terrible. And, one of the tough things is, you're talking about, and I like the example of the house falling into ill repair, right? You have an asset that is sitting there deteriorating, becoming worth less money every day. So who does have the legal authority to sell the home in those situations?
Well, we have to remember that the legal authority to sell the home is based on who's on the deed. The deed
Mhm,
is a governing document. So
mhm,
you first have to check that out and make sure that that's up to date and legit based on who's passed away, because that
mhm,
may be several transactions behind. Um, that's the first thing you have to check. The husband may have passed away first, and the wife has got the property from the husband, but nobody ever updated the deed for that passing away. Nobody ever
mhm,
updated the deed for that death. So that's the first thing. You check the deed and make sure whose name is actually on the deed, who owns it. If the person that's on the deed is actually deceased, and we're dealing with that um, whole problem, then you've got to look and say, well, the executor, it's the estate of the person that's passed away, the deceased person. Well, is there an executor? Did they have a will? If not, then it's the administrator that has the power to control the property and what happens to the property after that person's passed away. So it depends on, is there a will or is there not a will? And then even if there is a will, you've also got to look at who has been granted the power to sell, because some wills will say, I want my executor to decide what to do with the property, but then they don't grant, under Virginia statute, the actual statutory authority for that person to do the disposition of the property. And then you have to fight that issue. So
Yeah.
yeah, it gets worse and worse the further you dive down the hole. Sorry.
It does, and, Aaron, from your side, like I said, theory meets reality, right? From your side, what is the most common authority problem that you run into?
I just dealt with it last month. We get a lot of probates.
Mhm.
You need the attorney in fact in place, and it helps to work with an attorney that can make sure the documentation is done timely. Especially, I'm in the middle of one right now. It has 9 heirs to the estate. I already know that's just going to be probably a month, 2 months down the line, but that always seems to be the issue is you just have either the probate's not done, so then you're pushing that out to as soon as the attorney can get that documentation in place. Sometimes it's that the heirs, the 9 heirs that are just not agreeing, whether it's purchase price or a time to sell, or one of them wants to purchase the property for themselves, but they're not qualified to finance. The property is also exactly what we talked about, deferred maintenance.
Mhm.
It's not going to qualify for traditional financing, and then that's why it does make sense to sell as is to an investor. So a lot of the issue seems to be that documentation is not in place, or the heirs just they don't agree, and then that's why it helps to be able to sit down with him or have the attorney break the news to him, because it's true. It's kind of making sure that everybody's aligned and somebody bringing somebody to reality.
Oh, we're good at breaking bad news, right? Even though we may be very nice people, bad news is kind of what we deal in sometimes. So, Aaron, you kind of told the story about the 9 people.
Yeah.
That one's going to be a little bit rocky. How often do you see sales get delayed where you've got a buyer sitting there? I mean, you're wanting, like, give me the house, but
Yeah.
you can't because things have to go get fixed. I mean, how frequently does that happen?
I'll tell you based on a true statistic. We contracted 8 properties last month, and 3 of those were from 2 months prior. It's just waiting on the estate to have everything done. Sometimes it just needs to go to court, and the judge just needs to give their stamp of approval. Some cities are a lot faster to work with than others, and I mean it's probably 30% of the transactions that we're doing. And it ends up being about a 1 to 3 month timeline before we can actually close.
And that's 3 more months of bills piling up, the wear
Exactly.
being put in the house and everything else. And, Jeff, from your perspective, like, how often do you see that things are just held up because something was wrong that needs to now be fixed?
It happens more often than it needs to. I guess that's the point I would make. And
Mhm.
Aaron, you had referenced, I think you had 7 errors. And I can tell you a story. If I have time to do it, I'll tell you a story about that's even worse than that. There was a property that we had dealt with that had, if you can picture the parents' generation, okay, grandma and grandpa's generation, both of those people had passed away. Well, they had had 7 kids, and that sounds great. Well, in the intervening years, some of those people had wills, some of those people didn't have wills. Estates go on. One of the 7 children of those parents had 14 kids of their own, and they were all with different folks. Okay. So when you get to the 3rd generation down and you've got 14 different kids,
Right.
not to mention all the cousins and uncles and aunts and everybody else that's still alive and maybe not, or who knows what they've got, it's a math problem. And I mean, you could see whatever the math works out to be. I mean, it's 1/100th of a share of a home, and you're waiting for months to get that done. And it's a tragedy because then the house gets sent into disrepair. The case that I'm talking about, the house actually did get sent into disrepair. The town had to put out a demolition order on it, and then it's just a piece of land. So you've lost all that capital of the house. The house is gone, and it's just a
Uh,
piece of land. It's almost worth nothing. So
that's terrible.
yeah,
I'm just imagining who has 14 kids. I was like, that's terrible.
but
Like, and then to have to deal with that. I mean, it's not terrible. I have 14 kids, but it would take a lot of time. So, you see that, and that's where something has been slowed down to almost a glacial pace, right? Everything's slowed everything down. But on the opposite end, what situations do you see that often create the necessity for a quick sale, Aaron? Like, when you're doing it and you see people come in, like, I got to sell this right now. What do you see that creates that?
Uh, Deferred maintenance,
Mhm.
tax liens, landscaping liens from the city. Maybe it's a second mortgage that they either, forgot about,
Uh-huh.
and then they find out that there's all these liens, and there's a payoff that now they no longer are able to catch up on. Um, it's oftentimes that. Usually it's retirement, and they could use the extra cash. The expenses to maintain the property are just stacking up, or
Mhm.
vacancies. A lot of the time, landlords, they retire. They have a tenant that goes sideways. Potential squatter scenarios. That's so common, and usually it helps to work with the local investor that's fine to deal with it on their own and sell as is. So
Yeah.
take it upon ourselves to deal with that issue, and sometimes it's a big risk, but we talk through the numbers and we're really transparent about it, and you have to be so that way they understand where it's coming from.
Yeah, the squatters thing, I mean, you can read the headlines. It's good pay. It's just good clickbait. But if you're ever bored, read about squatters and just how bad it can get. I
Hmm.
read about a guy that professionally, if you have a squatter, he'll go squat in the house with them and just be as annoying as possible for as many days as possible till they leave. And
yep,
he was
that's
worried because some people get violent about that. Obviously, when you try to sleep and blare music and everything else. But one of the things that at the intersection of divorce and estate planning that we run into sometimes is when an ex-spouse almost becomes a squatter. We had a situation a long time ago, not we, me, where I had somebody, they were going through divorce, the other side had already signed an agreement to move out. They were going to move out on the day the divorce was finalized. Everybody was good, going to move out. Client passes away like a week before the divorce is finalized. Obviously, we can't move forward. So, Jeff, have you seen those situations where like an ex-spouse is sitting in the house, kind of holding things up for the rest of the heirs?
not personally had that experience. What was the resolution on that? I'd be interested to
So
know how that was resolved because he's an owner of the house. The agreement would be invalid, correct? The
so
divorce agreement?
fortunately, a very wise attorney, I'm not gonna say who, had put in that the agreement survived death.
Oh,
And the ex didn't want to move out, but it was a possibility for the divorce. The heirs came in and we didn't have to go to court. We didn't go to trial over it, but the judge made very clear that he was inclined to evict the lady and charge her for whatever amount we wanted to charge for back rent during
wow.
this process. And so we were able to get it done, but I would say out of a stroke of luck. I mean, who writes into a contract that's supposed to be 4 months long that survives death other than let's be honest, some attorney with way more experience than me had done it one time, and I was like, "Ooh, I like that." So I picked it up and it
Yeah.
it worked this time. But, I mean, how do you handle that where maybe an ex-spouse is trying to assert control if the estate planning had not been done properly?
I mean, you'd have to go through the eviction process, I would assume. I mean,
Mhm,
it can take several months and it can be
mhm.
quite expensive. But yeah, the eviction process would probably be the only way that you could do that.
And Aaron, how easy is the eviction process?
It depends. So coming from Vegas and Nevada's eviction process is, I've only been through one eviction process since we've opened and fully
Mhm.
operational in September last year. We've done 43 transactions thus far.
Nice.
And so that's a good thing. No
Mhm,
evictions yet. We actually ended up keeping a tenant that was not paying. There's a long vetting process that goes through that to ensure the reason for not paying. But
mhm,
I can speak to Nevada, and that process is depending on their age or if they're a Section 8 tenant, they get up to 90 days, whereas we would typically get 30 days of
mhm.
notice. And then you have to work with the right people to be able to provide that notice, ensure that it's documented, and then you get with the constable, and the sheriff will, show up to the property where the homeowner can then change the locks.
Mhm.
That process, you always account for contingencies of $5,000 to $15,000 because of repairs to the property that might be caused by that tenant or that squatter. And then, just ensuring that everyone's safety. So you got to work closely with law enforcement for that.
It's tough. I in a previous life did evictions, and I mean, once the process starts, they're generally not nice to the property.
Mhm.
Then not only are you trying to get somebody evicted, but you're trying to see what damages they caused. You're trying to see, if they decided to put a towel in the kitchen sink and turn it on before they left. Or what happens is they just walk out and don't tell you that they walked out, and leave the house sitting there wide open for raccoons to move in.
Mhm.
So, as we wrap up here, Jeff, I know that when people pass away, it's very important to locate documents.
Mhm.
And, it's hard, right? You're going through the emotional aspect. You just had somebody you care about pass away. And the first thing a heartless attorney will say is, well, what documents do you have? So, what are the documents that people need to have in mind? Like, yeah, it's not going to happen on day one, but they need to start trying to gather or even talk to their older relatives about now to say, where is this stuff at to make this transition easier?
Yeah, I mean, again, we come back to those main three, right? Do you have
Mhm,
a power of attorney in place? Where is
mhm,
it? Who's got it? Who is the
mhm,
power of attorney? Who's the agent? If it's not me, you name somebody else, that's fine. Just let me know where it is. I want to help you find these things and get these things effectuated while you're still alive. Who's the advanced medical directive agent? Who are the parties that are named in all these things? You don't have to tell me anything about what you want me to do, but just let me know where the document is and who's the agent that's named in that, and I'll help them find it. A
mhm,
lot of times people live out of town, different things like that. Situations come up and they come into town, they don't know where anything is in the person's house. And again, the big one is the will. So after you pass away, where's the will? Is it in a safe deposit box at the bank? Who's got the key? Where is it? Um, a lot of times people have no idea what safe deposit boxes even are anymore. One of their older relatives passes away and they find a keychain with 15 keys on it. Where do these go? Maybe the will's in one of those boxes. Maybe it's not. Just because you have the ability, just because you know you're in the will, doesn't mean you automatically have access to that person's safe deposit box either.
mhm.
Um, so that could be a difficult situation. Where are those documents? Do they have a trust? Who's got it? Who's in control of it? A lot of years ago, and evidently the system still exists where you can take a will down to the courthouse and have the courthouse store it for 99 years. It costs a small amount of money. The courthouse is glad to do that, but it may be the courthouse too, depending how long ago the will was written. Most attorneys' offices do not keep copies of documents anymore for various reasons. But again, they may have a copy of it, but it may not be the official copy. So that might be another place you could look. But yeah, those are the big three: will, advanced medical directive, power of attorney.
I always told my wife that if I pass away, it's going to be a scavenger hunt. I'm going to have a safety
Yeah,
deposit box with another safety deposit box key in
with
it,
a
with another
clue.
safety deposit box key in it, and it's going to take at least a lot of effort to find it. She
Okay.
is not amused. She's not amused at all. So, Aaron, and from your point of view, what should families do before even contacting you? Right? I'm sure a lot of people contact you and say, "Hey, do this quickly," and you're like, "Hey, I've got bad news for you. You need to have X, Y, and Z in order." What is that?
Yeah. I think, Jeffrey, you hit the nail on the head. Like, it's really important that you know who's the decision maker,
Mhm,
who's on deed, or do we have the right documents in place? That's always my first question. Whenever I go to an actual appointment to meet, I always ask, do you know if it's gone through that probate process? And they're like, probate? Or, I'll ask, who is the executor? And they're like, I think I'm the
The
executor.
what?
Yeah, exactly.
The who?
So you work closely with an attorney, and you work closely with a closing agency. That's, they can run the title, and they can find out who's on title, and any judgments or liens. That's first and foremost. I always try to work really closely with my title company to make sure that
mhm.
um, everything looks good on title, and I know what I'm walking into. And it is normal when you're dealing with investment real estate. oftentimes you're working with somebody that's fraudulently representing themselves as the seller, and that's what we have them in place for. Because otherwise, we'd be stuck
Right.
holding the bag, and it's not actually our property. We just closed on, gave cash to somebody randomly, which that never happens because of title companies.
Yeah, I there's a lot of work that goes behind that, and I'm sure that you've had to have some tough conversations where people, like you said, it's gone through probate, and they're like, "What?" And you're like, "I think I'm going to go to lunch now." Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll try again tomorrow. But I want to thank both y'all for talking to us. I think it's so important knowing the theory. You see the documents, the estate planning documents. To me, those are sort of the theory and the real world impact. With what you do, Aaron, and trying to usually get what is the biggest portion of an inheritance liquidated, so that people can move on with their lives and not sit there and have to deal with, you know, getting foreclosed on by the city because they didn't mow their grass.
Mhm.
So, thank you. If you like this episode, please hit like or subscribe. And we look forward to talking to y'all next time.